In 2017, Black Sabbath said goodbye to the world. Their farewell show in Birmingham, England, was one of the biggest rock moments of all time. Fans from across the globe flew in to see Ozzy Osbourne, Tony Iommi, and Geezer Butler close the chapter on a band that invented heavy metal. Cameras captured every note, every cheer, and every tear. But while the rock community gathered, one surprising face was missing: Wolfgang Van Halen. As the son of Eddie Van Halen, Wolf was considered the torchbearer of the next generation of rock. So when fans noticed he wasn't in the crowd, questions began to swirl. Why would Wolf skip the end of an era? At first, people thought it was scheduling conflicts. Others speculated that he was bitter about something. For years, Wolf stayed quiet about it, letting the rumors build, but then he finally opened up, and his reason shocked even the most loyal Sabbath fans. To understand it, we need to go back to what that show really meant for Wolf and why his absence was more than just missing a concert. It was about family, music, and a choice that carried heavy weight. Wolfgang Van Halen wasn't just another rock fan. He grew up surrounded by legends. His father, Eddie Van Halen, wasn't only a guitar hero. He was a musical innovator who shaped an entire era. For Wolf, Sabbath wasn't just a band from history. They were part of his family's DNA. Eddie himself had been influenced by Iommi's crushing riffs. Ozzy's wild stage presence shaped how countless singers, including David Lee Roth, carried themselves. To Wolf, Black Sabbath was more than music. They were the foundation of the world he was born into. That's why fans assumed he'd naturally show up at their farewell. After all, how could someone raised on riffs and legends pass up the last Sabbath show ever? But here's the truth. Wolf wasn't avoiding Sabbath. He was wrestling with something personal, something far deeper than just a ticket to Birmingham. Growing up with Eddie Van Halen as your dad meant always walking a tightrope between honoring the past and building your own future. For Wolf, attending that Sabbath show wasn't just a fun night out. It was a choice about where he stood in the world of rock. And at that time, Wolf had a very different mission on his mind. Every step Wolfgang took in music carried the shadow of Eddie Van Halen. When Wolf joined Van Halen on bass at just 15 years old, the world watched closely. He wasn't just Eddie's son. He was expected to carry the fire of Van Halen itself. But while touring with his dad, Wolf began to carve his own identity. He admired Sabbath deeply, but he also understood the crushing expectations of being tied to the past. By 2017, Eddie's health was quietly declining, though not many knew it publicly. Wolf was beginning to realize that every moment with his father mattered. Going to Birmingham to watch Sabbath end their career might have been historic, but it would also mean leaving Eddie's side at a time when his presence meant everything. This wasn't about skipping a show. It was about staying close to his father, even if the world didn't understand. And for Wolf, family always came first. When the farewell show came and went, Wolf's silence wasn't disrespect, it was sacrifice. But he kept this truth hidden, until much later, when he finally explained why he made that choice. After Sabbath's farewell, fans began to notice the missing faces. Rock royalty from all over had flown to Birmingham. Metal icons lined the stage to pay tribute. But Wolf was nowhere in sight. Online forums buzzed with questions. Why would the son of Eddie Van Halen skip such a historic night? Some fans even accused him of being arrogant, thinking he didn't need to show up. Others believed he was secretly feuding with Ozzy or Iommi. The rumors spun out of control. Wolf, however, stayed silent. He let people speculate while he focused on his music. But silence in rock often makes the noise louder. And as Wolf prepared to launch his own career with Mammoth WVH, the questions only grew sharper. Why had he chosen not to stand with Sabbath during their final bow? For years, he brushed off the topic, but deep inside, the truth weighed on him. It wasn't about ego. It wasn't about drama. It was about something deeply personal that tied back to Eddie, to legacy, and to the reality of living in a family shaped by music and pain. Behind the scenes, Wolfgang was carrying a heavy burden. Eddie's health was worsening, though the world didn't fully know. Cancer had returned, and the family was doing everything to fight it. For Wolf, this meant staying grounded, staying near his dad, and making music together while they still had the chance. Skipping Sabbath's farewell wasn't disrespect. It was loyalty. Eddie needed him more than Birmingham did. Years later, Wolf revealed that at that time, his focus wasn't on saying goodbye to another band, even one as legendary as Sabbath. His focus was on preserving every memory with his father. When Wolf explained this, fans began to understand. Rock isn't just about history, it's about the moments you don't get back. Sabbath was saying farewell, but Wolf knew he would eventually face a farewell of his own, one far more personal, far more painful. The world saw it as skipping a show. Wolf saw it as standing by his father. Eddie Van Halen wasn't just a legend to him, he was Dad. And when you grow up in the shadow of greatness, family means more than public appearances. Wolf could have flown to Birmingham, smiled for the cameras, and been part of rock history. But instead, he chose to spend that time with Eddie. He chose rehearsals, conversations, and quiet moments. That choice became more powerful when Eddie passed in 2020. Suddenly, Wolf's decision made sense. Sabbath's farewell was historic, but Wolf's farewell to his father was priceless. His absence at Birmingham wasn't a slight against Sabbath. It was proof of where his heart truly was. Another reason Wolf skipped the Sabbath farewell was because he was carving his own path. In 2017, he was already working on what would become Mammoth WVH, his solo project. The world expected him to simply be Eddie's son, playing Van Halen hits forever. But Wolf wanted more. He wanted his own voice, his own sound. Attending Sabbath's farewell might have kept him tied to the past, but staying home, working on his craft, and being with Eddie kept him moving toward the future. When Mammoth WVH finally released its debut in 2021, fans realized Wolf's vision was bigger than anyone had guessed. He wasn't just a witness to rock history. He was determined to create his own. When Wolf finally spoke about missing the Sabbath farewell, fans were stunned by his honesty. He admitted that while he loved Sabbath deeply, his focus at the time was entirely on family. He didn't want to leave his father when his health was fragile. He didn't want to miss moments with Eddie that could never be repeated. And while people online debated his choices, Wolf made peace with them. He wasn't trying to please everyone. He was simply choosing what mattered most. His explanation didn't just clear the air. It revealed the kind of person Wolf really is. Not a rock star chasing headlines, not a legacy child living off his father's name, but a musician who values loyalty above fame. When Wolf's explanation spread, something unexpected happened. Respect. Ozzy, Iommi, and other rock legends who knew the Van Halen family understood immediately. They had lived through their own struggles, their own moments of choosing family over the stage. Sabbath didn't resent Wolf for not being there. If anything, they admired his choice. In the world of rock, where egos often clash and headlines dominate, Wolf's loyalty to Eddie was a reminder of what really matters. Music is eternal. Concerts come and go, but family is irreplaceable. By missing Sabbath's farewell, Wolf showed the world what true rock values look like: loyalty, love, and sacrifice. Black Sabbath's farewell was legendary. But for Wolf Van Halen, the real farewell happened 3 years later, in 2020, when he said goodbye to Eddie. In interviews, he admitted that he had no regrets about missing Birmingham, because while fans celebrated Sabbath's history, he was living through the final chapters of his father's story. That choice shaped his music, his perspective, and his future. Today, Mammoth WVH stands not just as a tribute to his father, but as Wolf's declaration of independence. He didn't attend Sabbath's farewell because he was already facing one of his own, a farewell far more personal, far more painful, and far more important. And in the end, that truth silenced every critic. Wolf Van Halen didn't miss Sabbath's farewell out of arrogance or indifference. He missed it because he understood what mattered most. Not the crowd, not the cameras, but family. Always family.